This video is brought to you by Raycon. So I don't know about you guys, but I'll be honest, I don't really care that much about privacy anymore. I used to think a lot about how I could be smart with my data and location tracking and passwords, but it kind of feels like there's not really room for privacy in our society anymore. And that we're also surveillance happy, that attempting to avoid this is like trying to eat melting ice cream with chopsticks. But whereas it used to be evil corporations and government agencies that were watching our every move, now it feels like we have to worry about random people with phones. Whether we're just gossiping at brunch, crying in Times Square, or just minding our own damn business at the mall, it's increasingly impossible to feel safe from the prying eyes of any jabroni's smartphone camera. In short, the fact that any of us could have a private moment unknowingly shared with the entire world in the span of seconds feels like it should be kind of a big deal. So we want to ask, how did normie on normie surveillance become so normalized? Have we become our own big brothers? And if so, what are the broader societal implications? Let's try to figure it out in this video. The new surveillance is all of us. Hey, but before we get into it, I want to talk about this video sponsor, Raycon. Now, Raycon's everyday earbuds look sleek and bring high quality sound to everything I listen to, whether it's music, podcast, or when I'm just watching TV on Bluetooth. Because guys, when you get older sometimes and you live with other people, they might not want to watch the new season of Invincible when you want to watch it. So thanks, Raycon. Their wireless earbuds are available in a range of fun colors to fit every style and a variety of fit options to fit every ear. Not to mention my favorite part, they offer quality audio at half the price of other premium brands. If you're like me and you often lose your headphones, this is very clutch. Plus, they're super comfortable to wear because they have these optimized gel tips that adapt to the contours of your ears. And this design helps them stay put no matter what, even if you're exercising, or in my case, you like to wear them when you sleep, but you also roll around when you sleep. You know, they're gonna stay in, I promise. And they're the perfect choice to gift this upcoming holiday season. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I can't think of a much better gift that I would want before a long flight home for the holidays than Raycon's everyday earbuds, which offer 8 hours of playtime and noise isolation. So I can just have a relaxing trip home without worrying about the battery dying or loud plane noise. And don't forget to check out their new line of Raycon Home and Raycon PowerTech products, like the Magic 180 charging cable and faucet filter. Now, Raycon has Black Friday and Cyber Monday promotions across their entire site with select products up to 50% off this week only. And you could save even more because this year Raycon is offering limited time bundles. But you gotta hurry up though, this deal ends November 27th. Shop Raycon's Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales for their biggest holiday discounts yet. So go to buyraycon.com/wisecrack and get up to 50% off site-wide. Now, let's get back to the show. So, is it wrong, harmless, or douchey to film someone in public? A practice which is called lateral surveillance by some scholars. Well, let's start by asking, where does this impulse really come from? Now, we've been sneaking shots of strangers ever since handheld cameras came onto the scene. All the way back in the late 19th century, amateur photographers started snapping shots of celebrities and socialites, usually against their will, and peddling those photos to newspapers. Now, this helped create the tabloid, which is part and parcel with that era's human interest reporting, which was, just gossiping about rich people, a thing that's fun and that we still love to do today. If you have any rich person gossip, drop it in the comments. The invasive potential of photography did not go unnoticed. Susan Sontag would later observe that it had fundamentally changed how we see the world, writing, "Photographs alter and enlarge our notions of what is worth looking at and what we have a right to observe." The same issues arose from the earliest days of film. The first work of cinema ever projected captured surveillance-type footage of regular workers leaving a factory. Meanwhile, early newsreels would mock disgruntled socialites caught off guard by cameramen. But of course, TV really brought home the power of consuming images of normal folks, this time from the privacy of our own couch. In 1949, Candid Camera started filming unsuspecting folks being pranked in public. Though participants later signed release forms, one critic still called the show sadistic, poisonous, anti-human, and sneaky. Hey, in the comments, say the name of a person that you know that is sadistic, poisonous, anti-human, and sneaky. Still, Candid Camera was outrageously popular, and it still inspires imitators to this day. Filming civilians living their lives would eventually stop being a gag and become a career. But truly candid moments never stopped fascinating. Whether it was footage of crime scenes stealthily captured by sketchy stringers, Michael Moore documentaries, and ever more prank shows. Now, the 90s brought us Girls Gone Wild, whose footage of drunk women and girls in various states of undress inspired plenty of lawsuits by unsuspecting subjects. But the combination of smartphones and social media gave everyone the ability to live their own candid camera dreams, unleashing a new era of lateral surveillance. Creators turned eccentric strangers into overnight internet celebrities.
An artist respects the silence. It serves as the foundation of creativity.
And of course, also pulled way more pranks. Except this time, the folks featured in these candid moments often didn't have the option to sign consent forms. And of course, they had very little legal recourse to get their image taken down. Today, this has all become so normalized that we rarely stop to ask, where do we get the nerve to film strangers in public? For their part, sociologist David Lyon argues the television culture prepared the way for our modern surveillance culture by making it okay to watch people without them knowing. And in a society where we spend most of our lives watching people on screen and off, we operate with the tacit knowledge that we, in turn, are always being watched. And what's more, we often kind of like it. Scholar Kevin Haggerty calls surveillance the dominant organizing practice of late modernity. And while we're mostly unhappy with how governments and corporations surveil us, when left to our own devices, we do the hard work ourselves via a sort of auto surveillance, serving up our photos and videos all day long. There's also a whole other set of questions about like how it's labor and how we do work and how corporations make money off of this surveillance, but that's not for this video, but we could do one on that. The normalization of publicizing our lives for the consumption of others has, according to R.J. Magel, made privacy seem somehow miserly. You know, like why aren't you posting? Why are you so secretive? Where are all the bodies hidden, you creep? And today, surveillance is a community affair. Scholar Jonathan Finn argues that surveillance exists as an aesthetic concept, a rhetorical tool, and as a form of participation in social life. Think about the last time that you saw something super strange out in the world. I would bet that you probably took your phone out and tried to film it. So why are we all so chill with watching and being watched? Because it's fun. Scholar Ariane Ellerbrook argues that this form of surveillance functions as a form of play, a way to mediate our relationships, represent ourselves, and even feel empowered via that representation. Not to mention that we just get buckets of sweet dopamine filling our brain when someone hearts a photo of us sitting in front of a place of tacos that says like, "It's taco day," or "I'm the taco king." And feeling famous for getting hundreds of likes on Instagram isn't nefarious, right? And indeed, that's why Lyon argues that the surveillance that surrounds us today is not your classically imagined panopticon, but rather, this is great, guys, a fun opticon. Unlike the punitive and oppressive forces of the panopticon, the fun opticon, Lyon writes, feels like pleasure, convenience, choice, and community. Of course, the constant giving and receiving of the surveillance gaze necessarily turns public spaces into permanent film sets. This leads Lyon to conclude that there is a downside to all this fun. He writes, "We've given up personal autonomy and freedom in the name of connectivity, pleasure, and convenience." And of course, who's getting in the way of our autonomy? Well, other people's cameras. Sontag once compared cameras to guns, and as with guns, whoever wields the camera wields the power. Unlike guns, I could see a world where cameras and filming people in public gets heavily regulated by the government for the safety of humans. The connection between power and surveillance comes to a head in what geographer Nigel Thrift calls the security entertainment complex, in which, as scholar Randolph Lewis explains, surveillance becomes entertainment, and entertainment becomes surveillance in surprising and sometimes disturbing ways. The trends exemplified by the way things like Ring camera footage have quickly become a new form of entertainment. Whether you're filming and sharing videos of fun little critters mockingly eating your crops, or just laughing your ass off at something dumb your neighbors did in the middle of the night. A device ostensibly meant to make you feel safer has become yet another machine for producing content. The whole world revolves around content, guys. Wake up if you didn't know that. Wake up, you gotta make content every day, or else you're not real and God will not shine their face upon you. It's no wonder surveillance technology has become increasingly cute, from police dog robots to pink security cameras, because in the fun opticon, being filmed is adorable. The security entertainment complex, it could be argued, would not have been possible before 9/11. A paradigm shift when Americans became perfectly okay with being watched as long as it made us feel safe. According to Wall Street Journal data, the market for off-the-shelf surveillance technology exploded from nearly zero in 2001 to $5 billion by 2011, and several market research firms anticipate it'll surpass $20 billion by 2027. While the government was busy implementing the invasive Snoop-happy Patriot Act to widespread outrage, we were unknowingly getting ready to live out our own little Patriot Acts by filming ourselves, our friends, and our neighbors. Our presumed right to surveil anyone who raises a modicum of suspicion reflects what scholar Jack Bradich calls our democratized spy and snitch culture. Bradich argues that while American society has long nurtured an ethos of rugged liberal individualism, at the same time, it has continuously fostered cultures of vigilance, suspicion, meddling, snooping, and snitching. For Bradich, this new lateral surveillance has some of its roots in the classically American brand of individual vigilante justice. In more recent times, lateral surveillance really got cooking when everyday folks were warned to aggressively expose alleged commies and subversive German Americans during World War I and then the subsequent Red Scare for the sake of patriotism. Amidst a rise in violent crime in the 70s, surveilling and telling on your neighbors became institutionalized via the National Neighborhood Watch in 1972. It entered schools through DARE in 1981, which is about more than just ironic t-shirts worn by people who you know did drugs. The program featured textbooks that taught kids the 3 R's: recognize, resist, and report. I find those boring, so let me know what your 3 R's are in the comments. Some of these kids inadvertently snitched on their weed-smoking parents who faced life-altering legal consequences. Mom and dad are trying to raise you and they're working these jobs they hate, and yeah, maybe they want to toke a little J on the porch at night, and now you got them locked up, you little bastard. And in the post 9/11 world, see something, say something entered the lexicon and became a mainstay in our lives.
If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
As citizen reporting on perceived, aka bogus terror threats ballooned. Bradich concludes that in all these ways, citizen surveillance has been promoted as a civic duty. Of course, being urged to observe the normies around you naturally encourages paranoia, distrust, suspicion, and also makes reporting your neighborhood kid's college party seem like the right thing to do. Social media then takes community policing to a whole new level with apps like Nextdoor, but also across the internet as folks try to catch criminals from the comforts of their own home. As Laurie Stevens writes, social media is like community policing on steroids. It's a force multiplier. And here it's important to note that while instruments of surveillance are, like most technology, basically neutral, the way they're applied tends to replicate ingrained social biases. This is abundantly clear from the reams of racist posts you can find on just about any Nextdoor neighborhood page. The online explosion of nanny cam footage, where people eagerly share videos of hired caretakers, often women of color, reflects forms of racialized distrust that permeates America. And these can have devastating effects, like in the case of one nanny who appeared to be shaking a baby on camera. It required multiple court battles for her to prove that the camera simply only recorded snapshots once every 5 seconds, which created the misleading shaking effect. And this is where lateral surveillance starts to look a lot like the very government surveillance so many of us claim to oppose. And yet our own eagerness to share our lives and the lives of others is making the government's job just laughably easy, because they don't need to go check our purchase history anymore when we just post every shopping haul on social media. The products of our auto surveillance and lateral surveillance have plenty of criminal consequences. But because this state surveillance is inherently ingrained with existing biases, police and federal government departments alike overwhelmingly set their peering eyes on communities of color. In one case, even arresting a supposedly violent dissident for merely rage posting about police violence on Facebook. But Michael, my good friend, you may be thinking, why should I worry about state surveillance? Why, I've never even done a crime. Well, even when you put state interest aside, there's also business incentive to nurture lateral surveillance. We've made videos on private tech companies and what they do with your data before, so you can go watch those if you want. You should, but you don't have to. But the gist is, every time we feed the algorithm with the products of our lateral surveillance, we're then passing on important info about ourselves, our friends, and strangers, and thus contributing to the power of these tech companies. And if you're interested in hearing more in general about surveillance capitalism, Epoch Philosophy just made a really good video that captures the topic nicely that might also feature the voice of someone you know. The point here is our mutual surveillance necessarily strengthens structures that threaten our liberty in very real ways. Now, of course, that's not to say that surveillance can't also be used to confront power. We've seen this when black activists have used smartphones to put police brutality square in the center of the national consciousness. At the same time, there are examples of people posting videos of folks who supposedly did a racism or something, and then later we learned that they were just made up for clicks, but, still managed to ruin a person's life. So the same mechanism that some use to seek true justice, others might use for clicks and attention. Meanwhile, our internet lizard brains react in real time without really thinking about what we're seeing. And this makes sense with surveillance happening at such a rapid pace. We don't really have time to think about the implications of what we're seeing and sharing. Amidst this uncertainty, mutual surveillance has basically become a semi-hard power we all exert on one another. But I say stop exerting your semi-hard power on me, baby. Give me that fully hard power, and then we can talk. Back in 2000, sociologist William G. Staples presciently wrote, "We seem to be entering a state of permanent visibility, where attempts to control and shape our behavior, in essence our bodies, are accomplished not so much by the threat of punishment and physical force, but by the act of being watched, continuously, anonymously, and automatically." That's because the visibility that comes with being surveilled changes our behavior, or at the very least, alters how we feel about our behavior. Think about it. When is the last time that you were able to do something weird in public without worrying that someone might take out their phone and decide the moment is too funny or heartwarming or just friggin' bizarre to not capture it? As Lyon writes, social surveillance produces self-management and direction. The surveillance gaze is in this case internalized, thus modifying the practices of involved users. We now all have the power to snitch on one another at any time, whether for entertainment, likes, or perceived safety.
After watching the man take off his plate, Smith tried to get his vehicle identification number.
This necessarily creates fewer spaces where we can be ourselves without feeling some anxiety about being watched. In such a climate, we no longer even need the mythic Big Brother to dictate and patrol our behavior. Novelist J.M. Coetzee wrote, based on his experience of growing up in apartheid South Africa, censorship looks forward to the day when writers will censor themselves, and the censor himself can retire. Constant surveillance means fewer spaces where we're willing to be authentic or deviant, where we can experiment with alternate forms of living or dressing or speaking or dancing like no one's watching, because it feels like everyone's watching and none of us are good at dancing, so it's like no one's dancing anymore. For these reasons, journalists Jessica Bruder and Dale Maharidge argue that surveillance has a chilling effect on speech and other forms of human expression. It is a culture killer. The sum total of all this is that we all end up feeling a little bit crazy. As Lewis writes, this causes self-consciousness, anxiety, depression, all exacerbated by living in a culture of constant monitoring. When public space belongs to the prying eyes of everybody, arguably nobody is really free. As Margaret Atwood writes, to live entirely in public is a form of solitary confinement. Which sounds intense, but let's be clear. I'm not telling you to delete social media unless you want to. It's probably good for you. I should do it too. I'm not telling you that you can't post your face wherever you want. And I'm not telling you to not film strangers, especially if you're worried for your safety or they did something really funny. But we do think a new type of social contract is in order. One where we all need to think really hard before we post someone else's private moments without their consent, especially if they were just being weird or a little bit of a dick. That is, unless of course you're making a funny TV show where you do pranks and you have a producer to hand out consent forms after the fact. In that case, I say go for it. But hey, what do you guys think? Does the fun of filming ourselves and each other for clout mean that we're slowly surrendering our own privacy? And when everything is surveillance, is nothing actually surveillance? Please tell me what you think in the comments. A huge shout out to our patrons. What, you have a Patreon page? Yeah, we do. You guys support us directly, which is so great. We give you some extra content in exchange. We got more stuff coming, by the way. If you want to join this group and really help us out directly, there's a link in the description. But you know what? Even if you can't, I still love you for being here, for supporting the channel. So if you don't mind liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing a video with someone that you like or that you don't like, it all means a lot to us. Thanks for even thinking about doing that. In the meantime, let's all just try to spend a day not being surveilled. Throw your phone into a creek, walk into the woods, take all your clothes off, commune with nature, hug a tree, eat some mushrooms and hope they're the fun kind, and then have someone that comes to pick you up later with water and food. If you make it through that, I'll see you next time.